Hey guys, I would like to read a story to you today, and the name of that story is Alligator Baby by Robert Munsch. So with this story, we are going to first read it, and then we are going to go through and break down those story elements that I was talking about. So as we're going through this, I want you to be thinking about setting, time and place. The characters are like the actors, okay? The conflict is the problem. The solution solves the problem, and then the theme is the life lesson, okay? So here we go. Alligator Baby by Robert Munsch. Illustrated by Michael Marchenko. One night, Kristen's mother woke up and yelled, a baby, I'm having a baby." She's very surprised that she's having a baby. It's not usually a surprise. I guess kind of it is when the baby comes. Okay. Kristen's father jumped up, zoomed around the room, got dressed, and grabbed Kristen's mother by the hand. They ran downstairs to the car and drove off really fast. Vroom! Unfortunately, they got lost. They didn't go to the hospital, they went to the zoo, but it was okay. Kristen's mother had a lovely baby. Then they drove home and knocked on their front door. Blam, 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 blam. So, they take off, they get lost, they end up at the zoo. I guess zoos have like animal hospitals? And then they made it home with the baby. Kristen opened the door, and there was her mother, holding something all wrapped up. "Kristen," she said, "would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. So Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket. She saw a long green tail and said, "That's not a people tail." Kristen lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a green claw, and said, "That's not a people claw." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a long green face with lots of teeth, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my baby brother." "Now, Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." Don't be jealous of her tail. Just then, the baby reached up and bit Kristen's mother on her nose. She yelled, "Ah!" Then the baby reached up a bit and bit her father on the nose. "Ah!" he yelled. "That's not a people baby," said Kristen. "That's an alligator baby." "Goodness," said her mother, "we've got the wrong baby." The biting was what tipped them off, not the tail and the claws. So Kristen put the alligator baby into the fish tank, and her mother and father drove back to the zoo. They came back in an hour and knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. Kristen opened the door, and her mother said, "Would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. The cat is very interested. The alligator wants in the aquarium. Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket, saw a fishy tail, and said, "That's not a people tail." Kristen lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a flipper, and said, "That's not a people flipper." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a face with whiskers, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my brother." "Now, Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." Just then, the baby reached up with his flipper and flapped her father's face. Whap, 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 whap. He yelled, "Ah, it's a seal baby. We've got the wrong baby." So Kristen put the seal baby in the bathtub, and her mother and father drove back to the zoo. I think they should think about taking Kristen with them to the zoo this time to pick a baby that looks like a person. They came back in an hour and knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. They said, "Kristen, would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. She lifted up the bottom of the blanket, saw a very hairy leg, and said, "That's not a people leg." She lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a very hairy arm, and said, "That's not a people arm." She lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a very hairy face, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my baby brother." "Now, Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." So the seal is back here in the bathtub making a mess, and they've got something wrapped up, and Kristen does not think it's a baby brother. Then the baby reached up with its feet and grabbed her mother's ear and her father's ear, and they both yelled, "Ah, it's a gorilla baby. We've got the wrong baby." "Let me do it," said Kristen. So her mother and father put the gorilla baby on the chandelier in the living room, and Kristen went off to the zoo on her bicycle. I think that's a good idea, to be honest, these parents. Okay, I'm worried about them. First, Kristen looked in the snake cage. No people babies. Then Kristen looked in the wombat cage. No people babies. Then Kristen looked in the elephant cage. No people babies. Then she stopped and listened. From far away, she heard, wah, wah, wah. That's more like it, said Kristen. She followed the sound. It was coming from the gorilla cage. So, all kinds of animal cages, and Kristen is listening to the sounds. Kristen looked at the mommy gorilla and said, "Give me my baby brother." The gorilla jumped away and wouldn't give the baby back at all. I would expect that you might have a problem getting a baby from a gorilla. At least she's taking good care of it. Then the people baby reached up a bit and bit. I'm gonna just read that again. Then the people baby reached up and bit the gorilla on the nose. And the gorilla yelled, "Ah!" and handed the baby to Kristen. Kristen jumped on her bicycle and pedaled home. There's something very strange going on in this book with babies biting. Okay. Kristen knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. When her parents opened it, she said, "Would you like to see our new baby?" Kristen's mother lifted up the bottom of the blanket and said, "Look, people legs." She lifted up the middle of the blanket and said, "Look, people hands." She lifted up the top of the blanket and said, "Look, a people face." Kristen's mother picked up the baby and gave it a big hug. Her father took the baby and gave it a big hug. And her mother said, Kristen, you got the baby back. Good for you." The baby didn't bite anyone. That's how you know it's a person. "But what are we going to do with all these other babies?" yelled Kristen's father. "There is a seal baby in the bathtub and an alligator baby in the fish tank and a gorilla baby hanging from the chandelier. We should take them back to the zoo." But Kristen looked out the window and said, you know, I'm very interested in what Kristen, the wise Kristen, is going to say here. "I don't think we have to do anything at all." Look at that. They're coming for their babies. It's like Jumanji in their house now. And everything was okay until Kristen's mother had twins. Everything was okay. So the babies at least got where they belonged. That's good. Okay, so let's talk about that. First of all, the setting. And there was more than one. Okay, so think about it. The time and place. What were those? The house, right? And also the zoo. The characters. There were a few. Some of them were more important than others. The main character, I would say, was Kristen, right? And then also her parents and the baby. And the conflict. So, you know, this wasn't like an argument type of a conflict, but there was definitely a problem. The problem is that Kristen is the only person in this book who knows which baby goes with which parents without getting bit. It's a good thing they have Kristen. It's really a good thing. And then how does that problem get solved? Well, Kristen goes to the zoo and she listens and she has this crazy idea that babies should look like their parents a little bit. Yeah, so thank God for Kristen. Theme. There's a few that you can take away from this. What lesson could we have learned from this? That's tough, right? So don't give up, I think, is one. Kristen didn't give up on the situation. She went and she figured it out. Okay. I think also that Kristen was by far the wisest person in this story, and she was also the kid. And so you could say, like, don't judge a book by its cover. You know, maybe like maybe there's a lesson there about listening to people. Okay. And there are other themes too. Maybe you have one that is not coming to mind for me right now. So we will be filling out a graphic organizer in Seesaw on this, and you can tell me what you think the theme was, along with all those other things we went over: setting, characters, conflict, solution, and theme. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the story. I liked it. That was a fun story. Thanks. See you later.